You are now listening to Asking for a Friend with TalkDoc, sharing insights through real, honest, and practical ways to improve your communication and relationships. Featuring your hosts, Dr. Pamela Kreiser, Meredith Edwards Nagel, and Teighlor Polendo.
So the topic today is a tongue twister. It's negative sentiment override. The Gottman Institute actually refers to this as a psychological phenomenon where negative experiences, thoughts, or emotions have stronger impacts and influences over your perception of someone's behavior towards you or you towards them compared to the positive ones. Essentially, it means that this negative stimuli or events tend to overshadow the positive ones. And this leads to a really skewed perception of reality, and it has a heightened focus on negativity. Essentially, if you think about your interactions with people, you need so many more positive interactions with someone to outweigh the negative, right?
Yeah, they say in a happy regular marriage, for example, you have 20 positives to 1 negative.
Oh, that's a lot more. Yeah, significant.
Approximately.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that it is in every moment, but that's what they
But that's what you need to have a happy relationship?
I don't know that they are making that point, just saying that's what is frequently occurring in relationships that are considered healthy and stable.
Oh, okay.
So I don't know if it makes it that way, but it's occurring that way.
Okay, 20 to 1. That's a lot.
So you're seeing things more positively.
Exactly. You're seeing more positive events, or you're perceiving more positive events between the two of you than you are the negative. This is really like one-on-one relationships that we're talking about today.
Yeah, and the thing that I was thinking about is that the term's kind of fancy, right? Negative sentiment override. But then you say, okay, negative, not positive. Sentiment, so it's my feeling about it, right? That vibe I'm getting of whatever this behavior is, that perception I have of your behavior. And then override, meaning it overrides the other things that might be happening. So it gives negativity some prominence, I think.
We'll hear people say, you're always like this, you always do this. And it's because we're focusing on the 1 or 2 times they did that. And then we've made this correlation. That's just how they are because we focus on the negative.
I think that's one version of it. I heard one expert say, it's like having a certain pair of sunglasses you put on towards that one person. They're like shades. So I have had enough negative interactions with you that I put on the shades when I see the phone light up that you're calling me, or when I see that you've texted me but I haven't opened up the text messages. Instantly the shades go on and I'm very skeptical that this is going to be good.
Yeah, I relate with that.
So you're thinking, oh, there they go again, or whatever, right?
Yes. Yeah. So in breaking this down to be a little bit more practical, is that basically a single negative experience or comment can have a bigger impact on our mood in that relationship, and multiple positive experiences or comments don't always outweigh that. So to balance this, right, we need to maintain balanced perspectives. And we do, like you said, there's research, Dr. K, we require a higher amount of positive interactions or experiences, right? These positive experiences help us to reinforce positive emotions, have resilience against negativity in the relationship, and contribute to overall psychological well-being, which Gottman Institute talks a lot about.
Let's take a couple of examples and then talk about what would be a negative sentiment override. Okay, so let's say you have it towards this person who's your coworker. You have this negative sentiment override, and they bring cupcakes to work for everybody to share in the conference room. What's your perception, Teighlor?
Why do they hate me? They're trying to make me fat.
So funny.
They're trying to poison me. So
poison you? That. Wow.
It's poison.
Meredith?
I was gonna say I think like a quick like yuck about somebody like that would be, are you even considering people's allergies, or like what time of year is it? Are people observing Lent? Did you consider all of these things, or did we not celebrate person X the way that you're doing this now? You do this comparison thing in your head.
Yeah.
You're such a suck up.
Yeah.
Like you bring the cupcakes in because you're trying to win everyone's affection. There you go again.
Yeah.
Okay, here's another one. Your partner flips on the television. What's the negative sentiment override?
Am I boring you? I can't just have a conversation? You wouldn't rather spend time with me? I could just keep going down that route.
But maybe not towards you. I think you're more attributing it to them.
Ugh, they're so lazy. They're like...
Checked out?
Selfish. Oh, you're going to pick
Okay.
something you want to watch again, or this is all about what you want to do right now, not about what we want to do when we have time together.
You love the Pittsburgh Steelers more than me. Here's another one. Your friend picks up their phone.
Like, I would view them as rude because they're demonstrating a lack of importance or attention to me.
And to your
Yeah.
point earlier, Teighlor, I think it's there you go again. You always do that.
Yeah. I'm like,
You're
oh,
always acting like that.
I'm doing almost like a negative confirmation bias about the relationship.
okay.
Like if someone's picking their phone up that much, I'm like, oh yeah, I didn't even think you wanted to hang out with me today anyway. I knew you didn't want to spend the time with me. The time with me isn't that important. You're trying to find a way out of it or a way of distracting yourself to not be present with me, you know?
Yeah, that's good. There was one time in the academic semester where I had a classroom way far away from my office. It would have been easy to have a negative sentiment override and say, God, my boss hates me. She's always trying to do things against me, or she's always this or that, right? You could start making up some stories about the causes of that decision, or I can make up like, they hate me, that's why I have this classroom down here. Now, if we were to flip it, we could talk about the positive sentiment override.
okay.
Okay.
So think about that for a second, just in contrast. So the positive sentiment override for that one is, oh, my boss cares that I get my steps in. My boss cares about my personal health and knows that a lovely walk across the campus is good for me, right? That's what you, or my
Yeah.
partner's on the television picking out a show that I'll love.
See the best in things.
Pollyanna.
Positivity. How
I
about
watch
your neighbor texts you? What's the negative sentiment override?
This just happened when I was out of town and I saw my neighbor was calling. And I instantly was like, oh crap, what did my dog do? Something's going wrong. It's got to be a negative, right? It's going to be a negative because that's the only reason she'd be calling me. And I was like, wait, my dog's not even at my house, so it can't. Yeah.
So we've been talking about the focus of this podcast, obviously, is to improve the relationships that we want to keep. So let's talk about how does that operate in the relationships we want to keep? It would be a really big wear and tear item on a relationship to have negative sentiment override.
Massive, I think. It's an understatement.
Yeah, because then you'd have the dark glasses on that see the relationship going wrong or the person's intent as being negative.
This happens a lot with family. And what ends up happening is you pick up a new fight at the end of the old fight. If you don't ever reconcile or view things differently, you just pick up that negative thing again, and it's just piled on top of your whole lifetime of negative, and you're ready to just escalate really quickly because you just are living in that negative.
So like taking a minor thing and escalating it into a much bigger thing.
Yeah, because if you view it through that negative area or lens, or if you're looking for the negative, I feel like you're piling it up. So you're just ready to take off and make a comment that maybe if you never had noticed that before as the first time you're seeing it, you wouldn't really comment about it. But if you're like, oh, it's the 100th time they've done the same thing, then you're just ready to fight that off.
So if you're looking for the negative and you're living the negative with the escalation, you're probably not really having a lot of positives in there.
That's so hard for me about this topic is I would want to say if you have a one-on-one relationship with someone that's constantly this negative, but we're trying to have this conversation today, my understanding is how to continue. If you've made the choice, I want to continue in a relationship with this person, whether it's a family member and you have a choice or not, or whatever the circumstance is. For me, I have a person in my life I can think of. I do want a relationship with them. Don't want to cut them out, but I can't help but every time I see their name on a phone or have an interaction, you're right, Teighlor, it's doused with this, I'm ready for the next negative experience. Like I'm just almost trying to prepare myself because I've had to do that for so long. And I want to know more about this specifically so I can have a more calm spirit in myself. Like it's more about the work I want to do to get through that so that I don't have to have this stressful negative weight in my interactions with this person, whether they're going to continue to be the way they are or not. We can't change them, right?
But isn't what you're saying though is when you see the screen light up or the text message come through, you're essentially expecting it to go wrong or be negative, right? Before you even know what it is.
Every time. I hate it. Yeah.
So then you're deciding their intention before you even hear the message.
Yeah.
because you close yourself off to the actual message that was going to come across. So maybe there was going to be positive, but you shut it down before it can even be anything. You decided, I'm taking this message negatively before I even hear it.
It feels like I'm in a sporting event and I'm on defense every time I have an interaction.
Yeah, so you armor up a little bit, right?
I'm feeling this way with my 5-year-old right now. I need to change something because most of our interactions are me correcting or me telling him what to do. It's a lot of battles. And I think we're having too much negative, not enough of the counter of the positive interactions.
That's actually a really great point, Teighlor, because that is one of the things that most researchers talk about related to negative sentiment override or negativity generally, is that it creates this emotional distance. It reduces our affection towards each other. And I'm not saying this is the case for you, but it can even foster resentment.
Sure.
Which I don't know that's true in the parent relationship. It's just because that's a special age that you're parenting right there.
But those two things that you said in research, what that does, that to me almost makes me, like, triggers me, like, emotionally, but that it would reduce affection between you and a person, and it would distance you. So this isn't just some shoddy, cheap little thing that's going on. This is a really internal battle between you and another person, really.
I really feel like this one hits the family really hard.
The words we just said were like less affection, distance, less connection, all things that we wouldn't want in those important relationships that we have.
Yeah.
One thing that occurs to me, though, and I don't live this way with my partner, but do think it would be terribly difficult to manage inside a long-term relationship, a romantic relationship, a marriage perhaps. Having these kinds of things appear, see those things as negative, and then have the consequences of the distance, the misinterpretations, the quick escalation of conflict. You can see what we've talked about already on this podcast, which is these 4 horsemen just start popping up all over the place.
Yeah.
So now we've invited criticism, contempt, defensiveness, and stonewalling into the room with us, a signal of the end of the relationship.
Yeah. I feel like this just goes with contempt because you start storing it away and then you're just harboring that towards the person.
Of course, that begs the question, what do we do to get rid of it? Is there a way?
Yeah.
And how do you turn that around? Because I think you have to be very strategic and very proactive, or I think it takes you down. If you get wrapped up in it enough, I think it's going to be very hard to stop the cyclone.
I was thinking a tactic could be practicing gratitude, just like looking for the positive moments. I almost think of just look at your relationship and look for the highlight reel of it. And when you see all those moments, then I feel like it dilutes the negative maybe.
Let's go back to what Gottman had said in the Masters of Marriage and Disasters of Marriage. Remember, they said, what's the difference between the two? And John Gottman said it's their ability to repair when things go wrong. The masters are able to, usually even if they have a bad repair, they're able to get through it because they have good credits in the bank. Remember that?
Yes.
And so it's those good credits. Maybe the strategy begins essentially with how you and I bring ourselves into that problem that we're trying to fix. So I'll give you a tennis example. I haven't done this for a while on the podcast. I was playing a mixed doubles championship years ago with my partner. And he was a great tennis player, had lots of aces, and we had lost the first set. We're in a championship with a stadium. People are all watching, right? So it's like a big thing. It's a district championship, and our team's all watching, the other teams are all watching. We were positioned to be one of the better teams, so we should be winning according to the sentiment. So we lose the first set, and then we're down in the second set, and I want to say we're down maybe, I think we got down 2-5 in that second set, and it's over in a couple points.
Okay.
If you think about it.
Yeah.
And I remember thinking to myself, I can't believe my partner's not playing better. What is wrong with him? And all of a sudden I thought, you're such a fraud. That's what you always say to your own tennis teams you coach. It's not about what your partner's doing. It's about what you're doing. And I thought, I need to play better. So I decided to play better. So we came all the way back to win that set 7-5. And then we went on to win the tiebreaker. And our team came down, they're all cheering, they couldn't believe it. And I thought to myself, it was me, not John, the whole time. Because he was playing actually just his regular self. And as soon as I decided to start taking my responsibility and being strategic about it, all of a sudden everything changed. And I remember thinking, this could have gone a lot easier if you hadn't just been sitting there doing the bad partner mindset, which was my partner missed that, my partner missed that.
I love that so much.
I could sit there and focus on all the negative things. I don't like how you hold your fork. I don't like how you fill in the blank, right? You talked about gratitude, Teighlor. What are you thinking, Meredith?
I think of this relationship in particular I'm thinking of, and it is legitimate, the amount of negative experiences I've had, and that they are real and they carry weight and they have bothered me in my life. But if I'm taking the option to continue relationship, then I need to find ways to calm me in those interactions. So then, to answer your question, there's a recommendation to focus on just your own self-soothing, where I tend to notice when the person's name comes up on my phone, or when I have to see them at a dinner or a holiday or something, I get flooded before I interact with them. It's just like finding ways to pause, or if I need to take a walk, or keep the conversation shorter so that I know I can breathe through it well enough. I want to continue a relationship with this person, so I'm not going to sit on the phone for half an hour. I can do it for 10 minutes, and I'll be proud of myself for having a positive interaction for 10 minutes, and that's okay.
So that sounds,
boundaries.
yeah, boundaries.
Oh, God.
Yeah, I know.
That's what I was going to say. It sounds like boundaries for you.
Yeah. It sounds like
And knowing-
boundaries, and also I think it's some strategies we've talked about regarding the four horsemen, especially stonewalling. This idea that we might monitor our own emotional bank and say, there's some point I maybe am not going to be able to keep having this conversation. I'm going to monitor that so that I don't get to a place that's unhealthy for me.
Yeah, because I've taken myself there too many times.
I think we all have, where we miscalculate and we're like, how am I in this?
Yeah,
What am I doing to myself?
For me, it's just recognizing, am I becoming flooded in this moment? Am I becoming dysregulated? Whether I feel hot in the interaction, I am getting stressed out, or maybe I've just had a really bad day. And so maybe if they're calling, it's better not to answer that day. That doesn't mean I won't call back, or I don't have care in my heart for them, but I just don't. I can't.
So I was thinking this happens a lot. Say we're late to something. You know how much I love that. I'll typically then start and look at like my partner and where they went wrong. But then to fix that, is it turn it around and say like, where did I go wrong? Or is it where did they go right?
I think it's more like, where did they go right?
Where did they go right?
I think it's more about saying, I perceive a lot of even their regular behaviors as negative, and trying to reframe those perceptions into what they're doing. I've had this before where my husband comes home and there's a slammed door. And it happens that our garage is a wind tunnel, and if you leave the one door open too long, it's going to slam the other door. But it sounds like it's a mean guy showing up. And I have a choice every time to decide whether that's the wind or a mean guy. And so the reframing is saying, oh, it must be windy out there.
Yeah.
But it happens to me all the time, like multiple times a week at least. It happened today already.
Yeah.
And it's not even windy.
I was thinking of in a marriage example where sometimes my husband will make a comment about wanting like the house to be cleaner, and I'll just instantly get defensive. But I did all of these. You missed like everything else I did while I was at home with the kids doing X, Y, Z, blah, 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 blah. And he'll usually be like, whoa, there's no part of me that's even feeling upset towards you about this. It's just something I also want, and I'm going to do something about too. Or asking as a team if we could. So for me, it's also the switch of like, why am I so quick to want to be defensive and think it's going to be a fight and talk to what you're saying. I don't think it's about switching negative on negative. I don't think I should go, gosh, I'm so horrible how I always want to defend myself. But even asking the question, why was I going to go there so quickly? I've had so many interactions with this person. They've told me so many times that's not what's happening. Why am I constantly doing that?
There's some different reasons, and I don't know that we've really talked about this so much, but are there people that are more prone to this kind of thing? I think that's an interesting question. We could bring that up right here and say some people haven't grown up with good communication models in their home, so maybe they were trained to take things negatively if it was said at all, even borderline. I'm going to respond negatively because I watched that happen. We know some people that have maybe some old wounds, or maybe a specific thing, like maybe it doesn't have to be house cleaning, but maybe there's a specific wound that when that thing gets brought up, it's just personal for you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, I got really shamed when I was a kid over a dirty room or whatever, and then now that just triggers me because I never really figured out what to do with that wound. I get that wounds happen. I get that bad modeling occurs. You have to figure out if you want that to be the story or you want to write the rest of the story. And when I teach my conflict resolution class, that's what I talk about a lot, and say, you get to write what happens next. And that's what we're talking about here on this podcast today. There's the negative perception. We get it. We know what happens. You can get down a cyclone of that where it's too much of it and it escalates all the conflict. And the question we're asking you is, what happens next? What do you want to do now? Because this is in relationships you want to keep. Because the other side of this is, I got a strategy, I bail.
Yeah.
Here's my strategy, I'm out. Right?
Yeah.
And I get that has to happen sometimes in certain relationships, right? That absolutely has to happen. But for the relationships we want to keep, then I think the focus then becomes, what do I want the rest of the story to be? And I think for some people, there's some old wound challenges and some modeling challenges that we say we're going to have to actually do some work around that.
Like taking accountability and realizing that really only you are in control of writing the rest of that story. Is that what you're saying?
I think so. And adopting strategies, like you talked about being grateful. We've talked about trying to have a positive mindset. I think another one that we could talk about is really listening. So instead of snapping to judgment, instead of instantly deciding what all of this means, figure out what's being said. Because maybe they're just asking you to move your car because the gardener's here. It's not because they think you hog the driveway. It's not because they think you're selfish.
Yeah.
You just listen to the whole thing first and then decide.
Exactly.
I'm telling this to you so that I do it. Because I would say the famous things they say, we write the books we need to read, and I think we make the podcasts that we need to hear.
For sure, for me, yeah. I appreciate that last bit of information, Dr. K, about conflict resolution. I feel like that's a good thing to think about in these specific relationships.
And I think I would tie it to family too, because we've talked about family a little bit here, and say that's a really interesting question to say, how do you want the rest of this relationship to go, knowing it won't be forever? With you have your parents or you have your aunts and uncles or people that maybe will not be around forever, and say, how do I want the remaining years to go with them in interaction? And kind of thinking about that from a very strategic point of view and saying, how do I want that to go? Yeah. For me, that helps me. Because it's, okay, do the bigger math and say, this is a relationship I care about. It's not maybe an easy person that I work with, but how do I want it to actually end up when all is said and done? Once again, thank you for joining us today. Please remember to rate, share, and subscribe to our podcast. And thank you for listening to Asking for a Friend.
Let us know what you thought of the episode. Our email is hello@afafpodcast.com. This show is for educational purposes only and is copyrighted. Written permission must be granted before syndication or rebroadcasting. Thanks for listening to Asking for a Friend with TalkDoc.